In this video, I'll show you November 2nd, 2021. Traveler, YouTuber, and urban camper Travis Hines entered City Hall in Bethany, Missouri to inquire about the parking situation in the area.
Can I help you?
Well, yeah, I'm having difficulty with the parking.
What do you mean with the parking?
Where's the sections for the 2 hours? Because I'm a little confused. I was going to choose some spots around the library. I want to go to the library, but there's these 2 hour parking spots. And does anybody ever have problems with parking around here?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I feel very unique in that matter because I'm really
confused.
Can you direct me to the person I need to talk to about the parking situation?
Well, if you have a problem with the parking situation,
yeah, because I don't know. Cause I'm parked right in front of City Hall.
I can tell you.
Is that a problem with the 2 hour parking in front of City Hall?
I don't know where you keep coming up with this 2 hour parking.
I saw 2 signs. Do you need me to show you a picture of that?
No.
Are
you pranking me right now, or are you really serious?
I get the impression you don't realize how bad the streets are and the parking is. Then you're not really.
Where are you from?
Mr. Hines voiced his concerns about 2 hour parking signs near the library. And after several minutes of discussion, a City Hall employee called the Harrison County Sheriff's Office to assist with the situation.
I mean, the parking's a lot better up north in those cities that I've been to. I guess I got called, or you guys are just here for me?
Yeah, we're here for you.
Okay, all right.
I'm not
You wanna
sure
direct-
if he's pranking me, if he's pulling my leg, or if there's something wrong. He's very concerned about the parking. And we're gonna get a photo. We've got a GoPro on our chest, so we're obviously recording.
Why don't you have a seat right here?
Have a seat.
Yeah.
What's
We're
it?
gonna go talk to them in the back and find out what's going on.
All right. Well, all right, yeah, because you didn't hear the conversation, so.
No, but we'll talk to you too, so.
All right, well, I'm the one that they called the cops on. I guess they buzzed the cops on. And I parked right out here, and I was asking about the parking situation. Apparently, we can park across the street. Because I mean, you know about the 2 hour signs, right? The 2 hour limits. Are you blocking me from exiting?
I'm trying to figure out why I'm being called.
Okay, well, I guess you want to talk to, yeah, all right, fine.
Have a seat for me.
You want to talk to the,
Have a seat for me.
what's the problem? What's the crime?
I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. Have a seat
Well,
for me.
I've been sitting in my car for all morning. I just want to,
Okay.
I mean, I'll move.
Officer Harris orders Mr. Hines to take a seat after having blocked his attempt to exit the building. But when Mr. Hines asks if he is being detained, Officer Harris insists that he is not. When an individual is detained by a police officer, they have been seized within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment, according to a long line of Supreme Court precedent. However, whether or not an individual is considered to be legally detained is not always a black and white determination. In the well-known 1968 case of Terry v. Ohio, the Supreme Court explained that, quote, obviously not all personal intercourse between policemen and citizens involves seizures of persons. Only when the officer, by means of physical force or show of authority, has in some way restrained the liberty of a citizen, may we conclude that a seizure has occurred. As time went on, the Supreme Court clarified this standard by adding the Mendenhall test named for the case where it was first introduced in a 1954 concurring opinion to the considerations involved in determining if an individual has been seized in the 1991 case of California versus Hodari. The court explained that the Mendenhall test established that, quote, a person has been seized within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment only if, in view of all the circumstances surrounding the incident, a reasonable person would have believed that he was not free to leave. And quote that the test for existence of a show of authority is an objective one, not whether the citizen perceived that he was being ordered to restrict his movement, but whether the officer's words and actions would have conveyed that to a reasonable person here. Although Officer Harris claims that Mr. Hines is not being detained, a court would likely find that his actions would have conveyed to a reasonable person that they were not free to leave by physically blocking Mr. Hines from exiting the building and then ordering him to take a seat. Officer Harris communicated through a show of authority that Mr. Hines was being detained and accordingly seized him. You're not being detained.
Let's talk to him. What's the deal?
We're just trying to figure out what your concern is.
Okay, so she gave her side, and you got a full scope of what she said.
No, I'm asking you what your concern is. Why you're...
No, are you satisfied with her story, I guess?
I guess, yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, so you understand where she's coming from, and my side is I'm interested in finding a good parking spot.
Okay. There's 2 lots right here if you're looking for on square.
Yeah, and if we could walk out there, I mean, I'll show you where I'm parked.
Where were you parked?
Yeah, I'll show you.
Just show me right here.
Am I being detained for a crime?
We're trying to figure out what's
Well,
going on.
then it'd probably be easier to like point from the closer area to this parking where I'm at and where I can park outside. You guys prefer to talk inside?
Yeah, it's cold outside.
Oh, it's because, okay, well, that's reasonable.
We're not sure what your concern is.
This is a 2-hour parking. I'll get a ticket for 2-hour parking. You know what?
Get a ticket for 2-hour parking.
Okay, so I guess I didn't ask the question directly. Will I get a ticket for parking longer than 2 hours? The answer is no. Okay, well then that settles it.
All right. Do you have your driver's license on your
What's
driver's license?
What is it?
So I can identify you. Make sure you don't have any warrants.
Well, I mean, first we have to establish a crime.
No, I don't.
Yeah,
Making contact with you is good enough.
Yeah, that's fine, and you can make contact.
Hey, I've been called here to make contact with you.
Okay.
Officer Harris.
Well, who's the caller?
If you're failing, they are.
Well, no, they were the buzzer. They buzzed,
if
right?
you are failing to identify yourself to me and not give me your ID, I will take you to jail.
Officer Harris claims that being called to make contact with an individual grants him the authority to identify the person he was called to contact. As we have discussed many times on ATA, individuals can only be legally required to identify themselves to officers if there is a reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, and the state has enacted a stop and identify statute that requires individuals to identify themselves in these situations. Therefore, citizens cannot be required to identify themselves simply because an officer makes contact with them, even in states that have passed stop and identify laws, and only some stop and identify laws authorize officers to arrest individuals for refusing to identify themselves. As the Supreme Court explained in the 2004 case of Heibel versus 6th Judicial District Court of Nevada, Humboldt County, Dort, quote, "In some states, a suspect's refusal to identify himself is a misdemeanor offense or civil violation. In others, it is a factor to be considered in whether the suspect has violated loitering laws. In other states, a suspect may decline to identify himself without penalty. While Missouri has passed a stop and identify law, which is codified in Section 84710 of the Missouri Revised Statutes, it simply states that police officers, quote, have the power to stop any person abroad whenever there is reasonable ground to suspect that he is committing, has committed, or is about to commit a crime, and demand of him his name, address, business abroad, and whether he is going. It does not place a legal obligation on individuals to comply with an officer's demand for identification. So even if Officer Harris had a reasonable suspicion that Mr. Fines was involved in criminal activity, under Missouri's law, he had a right to decline to identify himself without penalty. However, it's important to note that in some situations, a 911 call alone can provide enough evidence to support detaining and identifying an individual in a state that requires citizens to comply with an officer's identification demands when the officer has reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. As the Supreme Court explained in the 2014 case of Navarrete versus California, the court has, quote, firmly rejected the argument that reasonable cause for an investigative stop can only be based on the officer's personal observation rather than on information supplied by another person, and a 911 call can be sufficient to create a reasonable suspicion as long as the call shows, quote, adequate indicia of reliability for the officer to credit the caller's account.
Oh, you wanna charge me with a crime?
No, if you don't identify yourself.
We want to identify you.
Well, I don't.
Where's your
I'm sorry, but I have to enforce my Fourth Amendment rights. So
Okay. Well,
I don't understand.
You have the right to
If you
identify
think
yourself to me.
if you
so
think
where's your ID?
if you think your prosecutor's gonna back you up on that, they want to follow through on this charge. we'll see how those arguments go.
Yeah.
They tend not to go too well in your favor.
Okay.
Just doing this,
Well,
what, a charge of what?
Do you not want to give me your driver's license?
Well, do you want to give me your driver's license?
I don't have to give you my driver's license.
Well, I don't understand why you can't give me.
I'm making contact with you.
I'm making contact with you.
I'm going to run you
And
make
these
sure
two.
There's no warrants.
Are you asking ID for your own curiosity, or for the betterment of the?
We were called over here because there was someone that was irate.
Irate,
City Hall.
okay.
The reason we're asking for your ID is because a crime has been committed. We're not
Oh.
trying to charge you with one.
Well, if you think you want to follow through on charging me with a crime, I mean, see what your prosecutor, your city prosecutor would want to, go through.
So here's the question: is why don't you identify yourself? We'll all move on.
Well, why don't we establish the crime? And we got a Fourth Amendment here. We got to get through here. All right. And I mean, there's steps to take with that. If you want to fully charge me with a crime, then I guess you'll have to arrest me, and follow through on that.
Sheriff Place claims that Mr. Hines has committed a crime because they received reports that he was acting, quote, UN, quote, irate. However, he does not specify which crime Mr. Hines has committed, and there are some circumstances where being, quote, UN, quote, irate could rise to the level of a crime. Nonetheless, in this situation, it does not appear that Mr. Hines's conduct violated any of Missouri's laws. For example, Section 574.010 of the Missouri Revised Statute states that, quote, a person commits the offense of peace disturbance if he or she unreasonably and knowingly disturbs or alarms another person or persons by loud noise, offensive language addressed in a face-to-face manner to a specific individual, threatening to commit a felonious act against any person, fighting or creating a nauseous and offensive odor. While it is possible that the City Hall employees were alarmed by Mr. Hines' behavior, he did not create loud noises, use offensive language, make threats, or fight, and it is more than questionable whether the employee's alarm was reasonable. Similarly, Section 565.091 of the Missouri Revised Statutes defines the offense of harassment in the second degree, explaining that an individual commits this crime if, quote, he or she, without good cause, engages in any act with the purpose to cause emotional distress to another person. And Section 565.090 defines harassment in the first degree as engaging in the same behavior and actually causing the person to suffer emotional distress. Again, although it does appear that Mr. Hines's behavior created at least some level of emotional distress. For the City Hall employees, there is absolutely no evidence that Mr. Hines instigated this interaction with the purpose of distressing them. And even if it could be argued that his behavior was meant to cause emotional distress, Mr. Hines was clearly within his First Amendment rights to complain about the parking situation.
If you think that's what your city prosecutor is going to support you on, I mean, this is a contact thing. I was just asking about parking. This would be laughed out of court, Harris. But if you want to follow through.
Yeah. Are you failing to give me your ID?
Are you failing to give me your ID?
Are you failing to give me your ID?
Okay, I'm willing to exchange IDs.
Face the wall.
All right.
Put your phone down.
All right.
After Mr. Hines refused to give his ID to Officer Harris placed him under arrest. Mr. Hines was held in the county jail overnight and charged with second-degree harassment and peace disturbance. The charges were dropped a few days later, but it is unclear whether Mr. Hines will be following up this encounter with legal action. Overall, the Bethany officers get an F for escalating an innocent encounter into a criminal arrest, displaying a fundamental misunderstanding of Missouri's identification laws, and for baselessly accusing Mr. Hines of committing a crime. In an effort to gain control of the situation, instead of approaching Mr. Hines in an effort to assist him or be of service in some capacity, the Bethany officers criminalized his behavior and ultimately arrested him for failing to comply with their unlawful orders. This interaction presented a perfect opportunity for the officers to welcome a citizen to their city and address any concerns that Mr. Hines had about the parking situation, and nothing that Mr. Hines did suggested that criminal activity was afoot. The Bethany officers blatantly misrepresented several Laws completely disregarded Mr. Hines's Fourth Amendment rights and failed to do any measure of investigation before conducting an arrest. And it's no wonder that the charges against Mr. Hines were promptly dismissed. This interaction highlights how quickly a small misunderstanding can escalate into an unnecessary arrest when members of law enforcement neglect to properly carry out their duties. Mr. Hines gets an A because although he could have exercised his right to silence more effectively, he remained calm and collected throughout the encounter, maintained a reasonable balance between complying with the officer's orders and questioning his conduct, and challenge the legitimacy of the officer's actions without becoming rude or vulgar. At no point did Mr. Hines commit a crime or display any conduct that would warrant a police officer's involvement. And it is difficult to understand why the Bethany City Hall employees called 911 at all. Mr. Hines does not consider himself a First Amendment auditor, but he is also no stranger to police interactions. Mr. Hines lives in his car and travels all across the United States, stopping at various public parking lots to rest and enjoy whatever public facilities may be available, and this often results in the police being called, "Thank you very much for watching the video. Subscribe our channel for next video."